The pawn shop owner found a box of cash under Michael Jackson's old house. Inside was a list of 300 names nobody had ever heard of. A pawn shop owner in Encino, California, is holding a water-damaged cardboard box. His hands won't stop shaking inside. Wrapped in plastic is a handwritten list, 300 names. Addresses, dollar amounts next to each one. No signatures, no explanation, just names, and at the very top of the box, a single sticky note. It says, "They never knew. Good." The house he found it under, it used to belong to the Jackson family, but wait. That is not even the beginning of this story. Part one, the year is 2019, Encino, California. A contractor named Dave Reyes is hired to renovate the basement of a property on Havenhurst Avenue. Old house, famous address. The Jackson family lived there for decades. Michael grew up inside those walls. The new owners want the basement gutted. Reyes and his crew start pulling up old flooring. Behind a false wall panel, sealed tight, they find it. A metal lockbox. Inside the lockbox, a cardboard box. Inside the cardboard box, three things: cash, old bills, bundled and labeled. A ledger, handwritten, dates going back to 1979. And that sticky note, Reyes calls the new owners. The new owners call a lawyer. The lawyer calls an estate specialist. And that specialist, a woman named Carol Henning, who had spent 30 years handling celebrity estates, goes very quiet when she opens the ledger. She reads the first page, then the second, then she sits down on the floor of that basement and doesn't get up for a long time. 3 decades of estate work. She had seen hidden bank accounts. She had seen secret families. She had seen offshore holdings and buried debts and forged documents. She had never seen anything like this, because this wasn't hidden wealth. It wasn't a secret stash. It was something she didn't have a word for at first. She sat there on that cold concrete floor and tried to find the right word. She came up with one eventually: evidence. Evidence of something that had been going on quietly, methodically for 28 years. Evidence of a system, a deliberate, carefully maintained system for finding people at their lowest point and pulling them back from the edge, without ever letting them know who had reached down. She took the ledger home that night. She told her husband she needed to work. She sat at the kitchen table until 4 in the morning. By the time the sun came up, she had read every single entry, all 314 of them. She called her office at 7 a.m. and said 3 words: "Cancel everything today." Her assistant asked if everything was okay. Henning didn't answer right away. She was still holding the ledger, still looking at the last page at the final entry, dated November 2007, a name, a city, an amount, and a column that was supposed to list the nature of the crisis. That column, for entry 314, was blank, just a name and a number, and nothing else. She told her assistant she was fine. She hung up, she made coffee, she never drank. And she sat there thinking about what kind of person maintains a system like this for 28 years and stops mid-sentence on the very last entry, stops before explaining why, as if they already knew somewhere that the explaining was never really the point. The point was the name. The point was always just the name. Part two, what was in that ledger? Names, 314 of them, to be exact. Each entry had 4 columns: a name, a city, a date, and an amount. The amounts ranged from $800 to $250,000. The date started in 1979 and ended in 2007. Nearly 3 decades of entries written in the same hand throughout. Careful, deliberate, consistent. No recipient had been contacted through any official channel. No press releases. No foundation filings for these specific payments. No tax records linking them directly to a named donor. Just names and money, quietly sent. Henning started cross-referencing. It took her team 4 months. What they found was this: every single person on that list had experienced a catastrophic medical or financial crisis. A child with leukemia, a family burned out of their home, a single mother with a spinal injury and 3 kids and no insurance, a boy in rural Mississippi who needed a prosthetic leg, A girl in Detroit whose parents couldn't afford her dialysis, none of them famous, none of them connected to the entertainment industry, none of them the kind of people who would ever end up in a celebrity's orbit, just ordinary people in the worst moments of their lives. And someone had found them, but here is the question that kept Henning awake for weeks after she finished the ledger. How? How does one person, one of the most recognizable human beings on the planet, find a boy in rural Mississippi who needs a prosthetic leg? How does he find a single mother in Tulsa with a spinal injury and no insurance? How does that information travel from a kitchen table in Oklahoma to a man whose face was on every magazine cover in the world? Henning dug deeper, and eventually she found the answer. It wasn't one system. It was dozens of them. Local nurses who had Michael's team's private number, social workers in 12 different states who had been quietly contacted and told, if you have a case that has nowhere else to go, call this number. Hospital chaplains, church pastors, school counselors in rural counties, a network of ordinary people who were the eyes and ears on the ground, feeding names upward to a team that processed them quietly and efficiently and never told anyone why they were asking. The network had no name, no official structure, no website, no paperwork. It had existed for nearly 30 years, and almost no one knew it was there. Part 3 here is what the public record already knew. Even before the box, Michael Jackson had been quietly doing this kind of thing for decades. His vocal coach, Seth Riggs, spoke about it years earlier. Every tour stop, Riggs said, sick children were brought backstage on stretchers, so ill they could barely lift their heads. Michael would spend time with each one privately. No cameras during the bad tour alone. 400 tickets per concert were reserved for underprivileged children every single night. In 1984, he personally funded a 19-bed unit at Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York for leukemia and cancer research. That same year, after he was burned during a Pepsi commercial shoot, he donated every cent of his settlement, $1.5 million, to found the Michael Jackson Burn Center for Children at Brotman Memorial Hospital. In 1986, he established a $1.5 million scholarship fund for black students in performance arts. In 1988, he visited the Bambini G's Fay Children's Hospital in Rome, signed autographs, handed out gifts to kids who were dying, and quietly wrote a check for £100,000 before he left. Nobody asked him to do any of it. There was no press conference, no photo opportunity. He just did it and walked away. The Guinness World Records once recognized him for supporting more charities than any other entertainer in history, more than any other entertainer in history, and that was only what they could document. Part 4, back to the basement, back to the ledger. Carol Henning's team spent months tracking down names on the list. Some had died, some had moved, some had never even questioned where the money came from. They had just received an anonymous cashier's check in the mail during the worst year of their lives, and it had saved them. One woman in Ohio, 71 years old, remembered receiving an envelope in 1994. Her daughter had been in a coma after a car accident. The medical bills were destroying the family. One morning, a check arrived, $47,000. No return address, a note that said only, "For your daughter, don't look for the sender." Her daughter survived. The woman had kept the note in her Bible for 25 years. A man in Louisiana recalled getting a call from a lawyer in 1998. The lawyer told him an anonymous donor had paid off the remainder of his son's cancer treatment costs. Over $80,000. The man had asked who the donor was. The lawyer said he wasn't authorized to say. The man said he prayed about it for years, tried to figure out who could have known, who could have found him. He lived in a town of 400 people. He wasn't connected to anyone famous. He never got an answer until 2019, until the ledger. But it wasn't just the money that broke people when they found out. It was the timing. Henning's team noticed something as they worked through the list. Entry after entry, the dates aligned with specific moments, not random moments, crisis moments. The check to the Ohio woman arrived 11 days after her daughter's accident. The payment for the Louisiana boy's cancer treatment was sent the same week the family had been told their insurance would no longer cover the costs. A family in South Carolina received a cashier's check 48 hours after a house fire took everything they owned. 48 hours, 2 days. Someone had known, someone had been watching, and someone had moved immediately. That level of responsiveness wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was infrastructure. It was intention. It was someone who had decided at some point long ago that waiting was not something he was willing to do. Henning said in a private interview conducted years later that this detail hit her harder than anything else in the ledger. The amounts were staggering. The scale was almost incomprehensible. But the timing told her something about the person behind it that the numbers alone never could. He understood what it felt like, she said, to need something right now, not next week, not after the paperwork, right now. And so that is what he gave. Part 5, there is one entry in the ledger that Henning has spoken about publicly only once. Entry number 260, 7 dated March 1997. The name on the entry is a woman from rural Georgia. The amount is listed as $12,000. In the notes column, which most entries left blank, there are 4 words written in the same careful hand as everything else. She reminded me of Mother, that is all. No further explanation, no context. Henning said she stared at those 4 words for a long time. She said she thought about what it meant for a man living the life he was living, the tours, the cameras, the noise, the pressure, the scrutiny, to be sitting quietly somewhere, going through a list of strangers in crisis and stopping at one name and seeing his mother and sending $12,000 before moving on to the next name. Nobody knows who the woman from Georgia was. Nobody has come forward. She may not know to this day that the money came from him. She may not know her name is in a ledger in an archive somewhere, next to 4 words that say everything about why he did any of it. Part 6 here is what the public record already knew, even before the box. His former lawyers confirmed it in private interviews. Michael Jackson had a standing instruction for any anonymous donation. Never trace it back. Never let them know. Never make it about him. Because the moment it becomes about you, he reportedly said, it stops being about them. 314 names, nearly 3 decades. An unknown total. Henning estimated the cash and documented transfers in the box alone exceeded $4 million, and that was separate from his publicly recorded giving, which some estimates placed above $500 million over the course of his lifetime. $500 million, largely anonymous, largely undocumented, largely unknown. And here is the thing about that number. $500 million is not an abstraction. It is not a line item in a balance sheet. It is 314 entries in a water-damaged ledger found behind a false wall in a basement in Encino. It is a note in a Bible in Ohio. It is a man in Louisiana who prayed for years about a phone call from a lawyer he never heard from again. It is 4 words in a notes column about a woman in Georgia who may never know her name was there. It is what it looks like when someone decides quietly and completely that the whole point of having resources is to use them for people who have none. No cameras, no credit, no footprints, just names and money and the discipline to walk away before anyone could say thank you. Epilogue, the metal lockbox now sits in a private archive managed by the Michael Jackson estate. The ledger has been digitized. The sticky note is preserved exactly as it was found, still attached to the inside lid of the cardboard box. They never knew. Good. In 2021, the estate quietly established a new internal grant program for children's medical care. It does not carry his name. It makes no public announcements. Recipients receive a letter from a law firm. No explanation, no celebrity. Just help. The program is called the 315 Initiative. 314 names on the list plus one, the one who wrote it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that the loudest acts of kindness are not always the ones that make the most noise. Sometimes the greatest among us leave no footprints at all.